Did you really think you could understand me? The billionaire sneered, switching to French, his words dripping with arrogance. The crowded restaurant fell silent, every eye on the young waitress he had just mocked. For a moment her tray trembled in her hands, the insult hanging in the air like a blade. But then, her lips curled into the faintest smile. What she said next would shatter his confidence, flip the entire room against him, and expose a truth he never expected. How could a single sentence change everything? Her name was Amina, a 23-year-old student working evenings at a high-end French restaurant in the city. To most customers, she was simply the waitress, moving quietly between tables with her tray and practiced smile. But behind that uniform was someone extraordinary, fluent in 3 languages, the first in her family to attend university, and determined to build a better future despite the weight of constant judgment. Amina had grown used to the sideways glances. Some patrons looked at her skin before they looked at her eyes. Others assumed she couldn't possibly understand the sophisticated conversations swirling in French around the dining room. She didn't always correct them. Sometimes it was easier to let people underestimate her. That night, the restaurant gleamed with polished silverware and hushed laughter. Wealthy guests poured in, their voices loud with entitlement. Amina moved gracefully through the tables, balancing plates and pleasantries, but inside she carried a quiet tension. She had no idea the evening would become a test, not just of her patience, but of her dignity. One customer in particular, a billionaire known more for his arrogance than his fortune, was already watching her with the kind of smile that meant trouble. The stage was set for a clash she could not avoid. A moment was coming that would strip away every mask in the room, revealing cruelty, ignorance, and something far stronger than either, resilience. Would the girl they dismissed as just a waitress prove to be the one who silenced them all? The night had been running smoothly until he arrived. The billionaire, tall, immaculately dressed, and surrounded by friends, carried himself like he owned not just the restaurant, but the air everyone breathed inside it. From the moment he sat down, Amina felt his eyes on her, not in admiration, but in scrutiny. When she approached his table, his voice carried louder than necessary, making sure nearby guests could hear. "Ah," he said with a smirk, "so this is the service tonight? Interesting." His companions chuckled. Amina ignored the sting, keeping her professional smile as she took their orders. But the comments didn't stop there. Each time she returned, he found another way to belittle her. He asked her to repeat herself, even when he clearly understood. He waved his hand dismissively, speaking over her as if she wasn't there. And then the real insult came. Switching suddenly into French, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Can you even understand a word of this? Or is French a little too refined for you?" The table erupted in laughter. Some guests glanced uncomfortably at their plates, but no one spoke up. Amina froze, her tray trembling just slightly. The sting of humiliation pressed against her chest. She knew French fluently, better perhaps than this man mocking her, but if she revealed it too soon, she'd lose the chance to make him truly understand. So she played along, for now. She lowered her eyes, murmuring, "Oui, monsieur," in a way that made him believe he had won. His grin widened, confidence swelling as he leaned further into his performance. "You see," he announced to the room, "they send us servers who barely know the language of the menu. What kind of standard is that?" Amina's heart raced. Each insult added fuel to the fire inside her, but she kept her composure. Timing was everything. She knew that if she struck back too quickly, the lesson would fall flat. She needed him to believe, for just a little longer, that she was powerless. Around the restaurant, whispers began. Guests exchanged glances, some pitying, some amused, some silently rooting for the young waitress. The tension hung thick in the air, every word of his condescension adding weight to the silence around them. And then came the breaking point. He leaned closer, almost daring her to challenge him, and spat out another phrase in French, this one sharp, insulting, meant to cut deep. Amina's fingers tightened around the tray. She had been patient long enough. The moment she'd been waiting for had arrived. She raised her head, her eyes locking on his, with a calm, unshaken gaze. The billionaire didn't yet know it, but the silence before her reply would be the last moment he felt in control of the room. The billionaire's insult hung in the air, sharp as a blade. His friends laughed, their voices echoing across the quiet restaurant. Amina stood frozen for a heartbeat, the weight of humiliation pressing down on her chest. She could feel the eyes of every guest watching, some with pity, some with discomfort, and others waiting, almost hopping, for her to crumble. But she didn't. Slowly she set the tray down on the nearest counter. Then, with a calm that startled even herself, she turned back to face him. Her eyes met his steady, unwavering, and then, in flawless French, she spoke. "Perhaps you should choose your words more carefully, monsieur. You've just insulted yourself." The laughter stopped. The room fell utterly silent. His smile faltered, confusion flickering across his face, before giving way to shock. Amina didn't hesitate. She went on, her French fluid and commanding, sharper than any blade he thought he held over her. She repeated his own words back to him, line for line, exposing the cruelty he had just spewed, this time for everyone to understand. Every syllable hit like a hammer. The billionaire's complexion darkened, his arrogance draining as guests began to murmur, some gasping, others smirking at the reversal. For the first time that evening, he was the one left speechless. Amina's voice did not waver. With each sentence, she flipped the balance of power, reclaiming her dignity in front of the very people who thought they could strip it away. By the time she finished, there was no laughter left at his table, only silence and the quiet sting of his defeat. The billionaire leaned back, his jaw tight, but his eyes gave him away. He had underestimated her, and now the entire room knew it. For a long moment the restaurant was silent. Then slowly a ripple of applause spread from one table to the next. Guests who had sat frozen before now leaned forward, clapping, nodding, some even smiling with quiet admiration. Amina didn't bask in it. She simply stood tall, collected, as if she had done nothing more than what dignity demanded. The billionaire, red-faced and suddenly very small despite his fortune, muttered something under his breath. He tried to laugh it off, to wave his hand as if none of it mattered. But the damage was done. His power, his ability to humiliate without consequence, was shattered in front of the very audience he craved to impress. Amina returned to her work as though nothing had happened, but everyone in that room knew something had shifted. That night, the story would be whispered across dinner tables, retold with awe. The waitress who had been mocked for her skin and underestimated for her role had turned a moment of cruelty into one of courage. But here's the truth. What Amina faced that night wasn't unique. Across the world, countless people endure the sting of prejudice in silence, without applause to soften the blow. Racism often hides in arrogance, in assumptions, in the quiet belief that one person's worth is greater than another's. And far too often, those voices go unheard. Amina's story is a reminder, not just of resilience, but of responsibility. That dignity can't be bought, and respect must never be withheld because of skin, status, or uniform. So ask yourself, if you had been in that restaurant, whose silence would you have joined, the billionaire's smug laughter or the crowd's uncertain hush? And more importantly, what silence are you willing to break today?